So let's talk about Vatican II. So you grew up before that, and this was all happening while you were in the seminary. Could you tell us about the changes and how different things were back then before and how things after?
Well, yeah, it's kind of hard to pinpoint exactly what those were, but I can remember going to mass even before I went to the seminary. So everything was in Latin. I
Hmm.
served mass, so I knew some of the Latin responses to the priest. But I can tell you that when people went to mass, they didn't pay attention to what the priest was saying because they didn't know what he was saying. They had little missals with English translation on
Uh huh.
one side and the Latin on the other, but most of the people that were really pious probably prayed their rosary when they went to mass while the priest, said the mass in Latin.
Okay.
And so what began to change was the participation of the people in the mass. Before they just went to mass to fulfill an obligation,
Hmm.
and they were very faithful to that, but their part in participating in the whole mass was very limited. And gradually it began to change. First, they had responses that they would give in Latin,
Uh huh.
not just the altar server, but people. And then it began to be in the language of the people, English for us,
Uh huh.
and but not completely. They did still a lot of in Latin, some of it in English. But the involvement of the people in the Sunday Mass is just, there's no comparison. Because the priest would show up, he knew everything that had to be done. He didn't really need anybody else. If he had to, he would read the scriptures himself.
Uh huh.
And so he celebrated the Mass and the people attended, and very few received communion.
Oh, really?
You only receive communion at Christmas and Easter type of thing.
Wow.
Of course, most people felt that they were not worthy. That's just kind of the atmosphere in the church at that
Uh
time,
huh.
kind of the piety of the time. So all of that began to change where not only did they respond, but most people heard the invitation to, this is my body, then you come and eat and come and receive. And so that kind of participation just grew and grew. So, and I was a young priest at the time, a student and then a priest, and that was really exciting to see the church come alive,
Wow.
and not just the priest doing their thing, but the people participating.
Because back in those days, the priests had their back
Back to
to
the
the
people, yeah.
yes. So it
And
really wasn't an engagement with the priest and the congregation.
that's correct. And you would never know what he was saying anyway.
Unless you studied Latin.
And studied Latin, right? And even if you studied Latin, he celebrated Mass so quickly, you probably couldn't keep up with him. But no, people love their priest. That wasn't the point. It's
Hmm.
just the involvement that the people who were baptized had a part to play, and an indispensable part, really, because now we have people read the readings, the scripture readings, or responsorial psalms. There's a lot more singing now
Uh-huh.
of people gathering. Certainly here at St. Faustina, when people come to Mass, everybody is invited to participate, singing, responding, people reading. And then even the prayers of the faithful, that's all new. At
Oh,
each
yes.
Mass, you have general prayers, intercessions for the needs of the people. So just a real change in the way that we celebrate Mass. And as you say, the priest now faces the people, engages them, leads them in prayer.
Uh-huh.
Um, and, I grew up with that. So that's something that I'm really excited about still to this day. And, but it wasn't easy to bring about that change because people, first of all, heard about the council,
Uh-huh.
and then the decisions were made every year. Some other document was approved, And so those how that was implemented came as new things for the people. And most of the older priests, uh, they were so used to celebrating Mass a certain way. So I think for us as younger priests, one of our roles in the parishes was to help the older pastors understand the changes,
Hmm.
and that's what happened to me. I was at Blessed Sacrament Parish at the time, and
Was there a lot of resistance, not just from the priest, but from anyone in the congregation to the
there
changes?
there was some resistance. I won't say a lot. Part of it was people just didn't understand. Why did we have to do this? Yeah. It's the same thing with, now if someone says now you have to do such and such in filing your income tax, that's totally different than the way you did before. Why do you need to change after all these years? And that's kind of how it was there.
Or just like how the responses kind of changed a little several years ago
Hmm.
in the Mass. So, do your attitude towards the changes, you think they were mainly for the better? The way you're talking about it, I can tell.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Because if there was anything that was obvious before,
Uh-huh.
it was the priest mass, so to speak. I mean, he was responsible for the whole thing, and you just attended. You could just show up in the back of the church and go to mass and leave when it was over, type of
So
thing.
you're just an observer.
Observer, right? And now you go and you're engaged, or should be engaged, and most people enjoy being engaged. But yeah, I don't see it's no comparison between what we had and what we had before.
Because I have seen some, I would say, some things online where there are some people who want to go back to the way things were done before. What do you think about that?
Well, yeah, I know about that. Some want the traditional Latin Mass
Hmm.
returned. What There are some things I would say there are implications of that, because you go back and you don't have the full readings that you have today.
Uh-huh.
I understand what they say, they lack maybe a sense of sacredness, a sense of mystery that they felt was in the old Mass in Latin, and you had the incense and so forth and so on. Yeah, but when you compare the difference, I mean, what we gained from the new Mass
Uh-huh.
it's not, it's doesn't even, compute for me. But I understand some feel that that they're much more comfortable with the Latin. But again, it's a more of observing and not participating. Um, Certainly the Gregorian chant that we have in Latin, that's beautiful.
Uh-huh.
You can still have that with the new Mass. You don't have it, complete in Latin. You can
Uh-huh.
have some of the traditional Latin music there. But yeah, I understand that, I don't see the need for having that many places where you have it. In our diocese, there's a couple of parishes that are designated just for people who feel that's where they need to go. And I would hope that that would remain the same, rather than every parish trying to create you know, a Latin mass in the old style just
Uh-huh.
to, appease a few people.
So, coming out of the seminary in Rome, you said you were kind of on fire because of all these changes that were happening.
Mhm.
What was it like being a young priest at that time in 67, you said? Or 68?
68.
Oh, that's right. You were ordained in
Mhm.
67, but you didn't graduate until
Six- uh,
68.
right. Again, it was exciting. When I arrived back in Houston from Rome, I was assigned to St. Christopher's Parish in Houston for a few months. That was just a temporary assignment. Then I went to Holy Name Parish, which is near North Side, what they call close to downtown Houston. And what was happening at that time, there were certain people that kind of gathered us, a group of priests after masses on when you finished on Sunday. Like we used to gather at St. Joseph's Parish. The pastor was Father Pat Flores, who became Archbishop Flores. He was Archbishop of San Antonio, but as a pastor, he was very friendly and gathered us. It was exciting that we were kind of gathering to talk about the changes, because that's what we were doing. We were implementing changes in those days
Mhm.
in the parishes, and we kind of traded stories of how they went and how we could help one another. At the same time, it was struggling, with you know, some young guys felt, well, this is not enough change. We need to change even more. So those were the things that we had to deal with too. And then, Rome says, let's hold on. You can't go any further than this type of
Uh-huh.
thing. So
It must have been very difficult for a lot of the priests, especially the older ones, with all the changes that were happening. And was there some resistance within the church?
there was some resistance from some of the older priests for sure. Um, you know, I had that experience a few years ago when we changed the translation. And
Yes.
I understood it then, going back and reflecting on what happened to the older priests. This is how they had celebrated Mass for 30, 40, 50 years.
Uh-huh.
And then to come in and say, now this is the way you're going to do it, from Latin to English, or the language and the familiarity with the words and how you do that. And it wasn't just the Latin to English, it was just the changes. We had a 3-year cycle of scripture readings. And
Uh-huh.
before, we just had 1-year cycle. And now, you know, you went through 3 different cycles, 3 different years. And so while it was important for the life of the church and the people, the priest had to bone up on that, if you will.
Uh-huh.
And so it was not easy. And recently, when we changed the translation, to this day, there are some prayers that I had memorized before, and they have only changed a few words. I still use the old way because that's in my old age, that's how you remember things. And it's difficult when you get older to kind of reconstruct that in your memory. So I understand what they went through. So